Hello, my name's Sadie. I'm a cognitive behavioural therapist, but I'm also someone who has many years of lived experience of trying to deal with anxiety. And the reason why I'm making this video is because one of the things that's helped me the most with trying to get to grips with my anxiety is understanding where it comes from, what causes it, and then just trying to think of some kind of basic techniques to help to calm my system down. So I thought I'd use some of my knowledge to share this with you, and I think given everything that's happening at the moment, it can be really helpful just to try and think of how best to manage some of this uncertainty and anxiety, because it's really realistic to be feeling this way. So the first thing we need to think about, I've got some really badly drawn pictures for you, is our brain, okay? So what we've got here is a basic diagram of the brain. It's very basic. And there's 3 parts of our brain that are really important to think about when it comes to anxiety. So the first part is this little red thing here, and that's called our amygdala. And it's actually no bigger than an almond. Now, I didn't have any almonds, but I had a cashew. And what I want you to think about with the amygdala is that this is kind of what we call our danger centre. So this part of our brain has been around for like forever. If we think about evolution, kind of reptilian brains, we needed a part of our brain that enabled us to kind of survive and respond to threats. So we needed to kind of think about, if you think about a tortoise or a lizard or a reptile, and if you approach them, especially a tortoise, the first thing they'll do is hide. They don't wait to see where the threat's coming from. They just see something that they're not sure about, they hide, they feel safer, okay? And then if you think about when we evolved into humans, when we were cave people, we're just strolling around, there's saber-toothed tigers out there left, right and centre. So we needed to find a way to adapt, because otherwise we were going to get eaten or we were going to be dead pretty quickly. So the amygdala's job, 1, to look for danger, and then 2, to respond, okay? And it's a very quick response. You don't have time to sit around and think about what you're going to do, because when we start thinking and start engaging that part of our brain, boom, something could have happened. So what we need to think about with the amygdala is that it will make a decision for us on the best way to survive. Okay, so that's one thing that's really important. Now the next thing we need to know is that it kind of has 3 main ways of responding. Fight, where we attack the thing that is threatening to us. Flight, which is where we run away. And then freeze, which is where we appear helpless, we don't move. We hope that whatever's there, the predator, can't see us. And these are the 3 ways that we've kind of adapted to survive, okay? So your amygdala's job is basically to keep you alive, keep you safe, and stop things from harming you. Right, this part, the blue blob, is what we call the hippocampus, and this is your librarian. And it's amazing in that everything that kind of has been important in your life or has got a significant emotional meaning attached to it, your librarian will store in your brain. It's like a big point of reference. So what your librarian does is it kind of, when you're sleeping, it takes everything that's happened to you during the day and kind of sieves it all out, and it decides what it wants to keep. So it might not keep things that aren't necessarily important, maybe like what you had for breakfast that day. But if there was something really cool that happened to you, or like you ate an amazing piece of cake, for example, your librarian will then create a little box and label it that says cake. It will put in where you were, who you were with, what you were doing, gives it like a date and time stamp, records any key sensory information, so it might remember how good that cake tasted. And then it puts it away on a shelf. And if I said to you right now, tell me about the best piece of cake you've ever eaten, I'd like to imagine that there's a memory popping up. So the hippocampus is really cool in that it remembers stuff and it attaches really kind of important information into that file, okay? Now, the last thing we need to think about is this one, the prefrontal cortex, and this is this part of our brain. And what our prefrontal cortex does is it's our thinking brain, okay? It's where we have logic, it's where we ruminate, it's where we rationalize information. So it's super, super important. Now, how these three things work together, though, is even more important. Because often what can happen is that we're dealing with some super old software, which is the amygdala, because it's really, really old. And we're dealing with new software, which is our prefrontal cortex. Now, our amygdala is a little bit like what I describe as like a fire alarm, okay? In that, you know, it might see a threat, it might see a trigger, and then it will respond because it thinks something's dangerous. But the problem is that it doesn't have the ability to differentiate between whether something is a real threat, like it's actually happening, or it's an imagined threat, it's something we're thinking about. So why I say it's like a fire alarm is it just sees smoke. It doesn't care if your house is on fire or if you're just trying to make toast, it needs to keep you alive. But the problem with the amygdala is that we can't take the batteries out and we can't wave a tea towel under it. Okay, so we need to find other ways of helping our amygdala to learn when something we're thinking about might not actually be threatening. And the other thing we need to think about when we're thinking about the role of the amygdala, I'm saying think a lot, is the hippocampus. Because if you've got a past memory or a past file where maybe something has happened that's been really unpleasant, left you feeling in danger, left you feeling threatened, so it doesn't always just have to be nice files about cake, then that's going to trigger our amygdala as well, because the amygdala will look to our memories to think about, well, you know what happened last time when this situation occurred? Was I okay? So we've got lots of different parts of our brain that interact when we're trying to appraise a situation and think about how dangerous it is. So what then happens in our body when we have a fight or flight response? So the first thing that happens is the amygdala will speak to our adrenal gland, which is about here, and it will release adrenaline. Now, adrenaline is a hormone that helps to mobilize us. It gives us that like huge whoosh of feelings. And to get adrenaline to move around our body, it will need to go in our blood, so our heart will start to beat faster. So you might start to have your heart go like this. Now, to get our heart to move faster, we're going to need to breathe quicker. So we might notice that our chest might feel a little bit tighter, or perhaps we're kind of taking shallow breaths, a bit more like, so it's slowly building up. Now, because we've suddenly got all this energy in our system, we're breathing quicker, our heart's beating faster, what's then going to happen is the adrenaline needs to go to your major muscle groups. So that's going to be our arms and our thighs and our calves, because we need our arms to fight and we need our calves to run. Now, it might feel that our blood is going to pool in these parts, because remember, we've got all this adrenaline, so our blood's pumping to here. And what that's then going to mean is that we might have kind of tingly fingers, we might have pins and needles in our hands and our feet. We might start to feel really hot and clammy, because again, when this is happening, your blood pressure is going through the roof. So obviously when we're feeling hot, all this blood pressure is happening, our body's way of kind of cooling down, helping us to chill out a little bit, might be to sweat. So it might be that's why we have clammy palms, okay? Now the other thing that's really important to notice is that when this is happening, our brain kind of makes the executive decision that, you know what, you're in danger, so I don't really need to be digesting right now. Now, that's really helpful in the respects of we're able to kind of keep our energy levels where it needs to be, whether that's our arms or our legs. But that can be really kind of socially embarrassing, because it might be that suddenly our digestive system slow down and stop working. So we might start to feel really sick, and we might vomit, we might be sick, or we might have urgency to kind of empty our bladder or our bowels. And that's all because our body's like, I'm in danger, this is not safe, I need to get out, okay? And that's why your mouth becomes dry when we're feeling anxious. Now, some people report that they feel dizzy or lightheaded, and that's because we're breathing so quickly. So when we're breathing really, really quickly, kind of that. What we're doing when we breathe is we're breathing in oxygen and it's converting to carbon dioxide. And if we don't give ourselves time to allow that to convert to carbon dioxide by kind of doing deeper, longer out breaths, we're just getting a whole heap of oxygen, and that's going to make us feel unbelievably dizzy. So that's why sometimes people feel like they might faint if they're feeling really anxious, because there's just so much oxygen in our system. So that's a little bit about how we are impacted physically when we have a fight or flight response. Now the freeze response is a little bit different in that when we freeze, it's our brain's way of trying to engage what we call our parasympathetic nervous system, like epically long words, but it helps us to kind of slow down, calm down. So when we freeze, it has the physiological effect of slowing down our heart rate a little. It kind of numbs our mouth, so it might be that we feel like we can't scream, we can't talk, we can't shout. And if you think about animals when they play dead, you know, everything about them when they freeze is very still, very slow. But again, I just want to remind you, you have no choice in that moment of which option your brain will pick. It will just pick the one that it feels is best for you at that time. Which is helpful because whatever it's doing to try and help you stay alive, but it can also be frustrating. And this is where the prefrontal cortex can cause problems, because when we kind of think about it or we rationalise the way we responded in that moment, it might be that perhaps the way we reacted wasn't the one we wanted to choose, but we just responded in the way we had to in that moment. And it can be really hard if you've chosen to freeze, because you might then feel quite helpless. Okay, so that's a little bit about what happens in the body. Now, another really amazing Blue Peter-esque picture. So these three systems are another way that I kind of use to describe what happens generally, and this is based on Paul Gilbert's compassion focused therapy model. And what this is saying is we've got three systems that operate in our body, okay? Now we just spent some time talking about our threat system, so that's like the amygdala and stuff. But what you just need to know with the threat system in this model is that it is regulated by hormones of adrenaline, so we spoke a little bit about what that does in our body, and cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And cortisol, again, great in little doses, but a bit problematic if we are exposed to prolonged stresses, because it has an impact on our white blood cells and can lower our immune. So sometimes when we're in situations where we feel really, really stressed, that's often why when we slow down, we become ill, because of all that kind of feeling and that hormone in our system. Now your drive system is what we use to seek out stuff, okay? So at a basic level, it might be food, water, shelter. At a more advanced level, it's going to be stuff that help us kind of bloom and grow as people. So that might be socialising, going to the gym, any hobbies you've got. It's all stuff that we enjoy. And the hormones that are attached to your drive system, so dopamine and endorphins, they're both things that kind of give us a sense of reward or achievement. They feel really good. You know, that buzz you get when you've been to the gym and it's like, ooh, like everything's really high and amazing. Basically just hormones, sorry. But because we have those good hormones, it means we're more likely to go and do that behaviour again. Now the last one, soothing, okay? And this is a really, really important system, because our ability to soothe or be soothed triggers the release of opiates, which again is something that kind of helps to give us a very soothing, relaxed, kind of blissed out vibe. And my absolute favourite, what's known as the cuddle hormone, oxytocin. Now oxytocin is triggered when you have skin on skin contact, and it's triggered when you have a hug, and it's triggered when you cry also. But it's a hormone that's associated very much with soothing and attachment. So when we are able to self-soothe and calm, then we are able to kind of manage situations and stresses as they pop up. So this is ACE of these three, all the same size, they're all working they're all doing their jobs as they should be. However, what can happen, unfortunately, is a lot of us might have a fret system that looks like this. Now that can be for so many reasons in our lives. That can be as a product of our early experiences. That could be as a product of some of the situations we've faced in our lives, some of the situations we're still facing. But the problem you've got is that if your fret system is kind of enlarged and it's in charge right now, it's going to influence what we seek out. So what we're then going to want to seek out are things that might appease this sense of fret. Okay? It might be things that make us feel less anxious. It might encourage us to avoid seeing our friends, to avoid socialising. You know, it might encourage us to keep checking the news, just to be sure we're updated. It might drive us towards reassurance seeking from other people. You know, it's going to influence a lot of unhelpful behaviours. And then if we think about our soothing, well, we're no longer soothing to soothe ourselves. We're soothing to calm down this fret. So it might be that we use unhelpful behaviours. We might start drinking more alcohol because that helps us feel numb. Again, we might start spending prolonged periods of time asleep. You know, anything to avoid this sense of fret, anything to avoid thinking. So one way that I just want to talk about is how to soothe this fret system. And it's tough. And a thing I want you to think about, if we go back to what I said earlier in our body, so when we're in the fret zone and we've got all this adrenaline, all this cortisol, what can we then take control of in that moment? Well, the only thing we can really manage is our breathing. Because we can't turn our brain off, because we need to have our brain do that to survive. And we need all this adrenaline because in that moment our brain thinks something bad's going to happen. But the thing we can manage is our breath. And when I spoke to you about the freeze response and that kind of parasympathetic nervous system kicking in, well, when we re-engage our breathing and make it slower and calmer, then that helps to slowly chill out our whole body. Now, there are some amazing apps out there like Calm, I use that a lot, or Headspace if you're into mindfulness. I'm personally really bad at mindfulness because every time I try and do it, I think about everything else I should be doing, and I've got what I like to call monkey mind, like it bounces everywhere. But it's about trying to help you re-engage the breath, slow it down, and calm down everything in our system. So one way we do this, let's get a bit of paper again, is what we call rectangular breathing. Now, I'd love to say that you can just do any breathing technique literally for 1 or 2 minutes and then boom, that'd be it. But everyone's different. I tend to find that I need at least 5 minutes of just kind of rhythmic breathing, and then that helps the anxiety to start to settle. So what we're doing with rectangular breathing is we are going to take an in-breath along the short side and then hold it, and then we're going to do an out-breath down the short side and hold. And the great thing is there's rectangles everywhere, so you can do this any way you need to, okay? So I'm going to do it with you, hopefully. So try and breathe in with your nose and out with your mouth. So in, hold, and out, hold. In, hold, and out, hold. One more. In, and hold, and out, and hold. And when you do that enough, you'll feel your shoulders start to relax a little bit, your heart rate will slow. With time, you'll kind of get a little bit more movement, feel less shaky. and it will start to regulate your heart again, regulate your breathing, and just slow you a lot down. Now, the other thing that I find super helpful is that, bear in mind, if we're having this threat response and we've got all these feelings and all this energy stored in our arms or our legs, is what we call progressive muscle relaxation. Now, I'm not going to do this fully with you, but just to kind of show you what I mean by this. So what we do is we kind of tense our muscles really, really firm and hold it just for a couple of seconds. And you can do this from your toes all the way up to the top of your head. But the idea being that if we really clench it and allow ourselves to hold that position, that it's going to release some of this adrenaline that we've got stored in our bodies, okay? So we'll just do it together with our hands. So take your hands, squeeze it really, 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 really tight. Hold it. And then just let it go. And notice how it feels. Nice, right? And then squeeze your forearms really, really, really tight. Hold. And then just let that go. And then with your shoulders, squeeze them really tight. It's very attractive doing this. Hold it. And then just let that go. And if you do that top to bottom, and sometimes do it before you go to sleep, I do that a lot, it will really, really help to get rid of some of that tension and work it out. Okay, so that's me done. Thank you for listening to my little guide to anxiety. Remember what we're going to try and do. So by breathing, doing the progressive muscle relaxation, that's going to help re-engage that soothing system, calm that threat system down, get it to just like stop chatting, pipe down, and then hopefully your amygdala will be able to respond to what it needs to.